that's a lot of my face. That's hard to watch.
The kids are a lot cuter.
Yeah.
Actually, where are the kids?
Who's watching them?
It's a really good question.
I know. I have like 10 carpools going at the same time right now, so I don't quite know, and like 3 sleepovers. So I'm sure they're fine.
Mercy, you are a wonderfully accomplished television personality as well, but since you've taken this new opportunity, you haven't been on TV as much. Do you miss being on television?
I don't miss the fake eyelashes or the constant pulling of the hair every day. I'm kind of over that. You know, I miss parts of it but I have to say that I'm so incredibly focused on the policy and working from a communication standpoint with the policy team at the White House, and so I don't even really have time to think about, or I do have the TV on, but I don't have enough time to think about getting back on TV. But what I think is very frustrating is when you see the false reporting time and time again. It really is. When you're inside working for the president, you do see how the stories are being shaped constantly against the president. It's a very clear indication of several of the liberal media that are making a specific narrative because they are still upset about President Trump winning the election last year.
Fake news is real, folks.
Yeah.
Matt, you spent a good chunk of 2016, as we just saw, going out there. And,
the meat grinder.
Yeah, standing up
CNN, MSNBC, Bloomberg, NPR.
And you and I work closely together on a lot of these
just so you know, Ian is our communications director, and he's awesome, and he's married to the person who runs our events, Karn.
He's also a jazz singer and plays wonderful piano.
He does.
So if there would be a piano here, we'd have him.
His wife Karn is walking around here with their baby Violet. So just like with Mercy and I,
there she is in the back. Father-in-law Jim, sister-in-law Allison.
That's
it's a
right,
family
Jim
affair.
It's an all-in-the-family thing at ACU, and we're kind of all raising Violet. So they're all helping raise our kids. We're all helping raise Violet. You got to meet Violet before you leave. But Ian and I decided as the presidential campaign got weirder and weirder, which was strangely kind of intoxicating because it was like, wow, the people really are going to take over, and they're going to determine who they want to be the nominee. And it really had nothing to do with what people in D.C. thought, had nothing to do with money. This has never happened before where it had nothing to do with money. Even when George Washington ran to be in the House of Commons, he had this whole elaborate plan to pay for everybody's bar bills. I don't know if you know that was like the trick to winning seats in the House of Delegates, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, was to pay everyone's bar bill. It's always been about money, and this really wasn't. So Ian and I, with Mercy's help, we said, well, what do we do? I mean, what's going on the Republican side? Should we be quiet? Should we just go on Fox, which is more friendly and more fair and more accurate? Or should we kind of go everywhere? And we kind of all had the same thought, which is you couldn't because you were under contract with Fox, but let's go everywhere. And let's let them ask all those outrageous questions, and let's give answers. And I actually think a lot of people who are watching CNN and MSNBC voted for the Republican nominee, ironically enough, because that's how much change. And I think that's how much change is still going on, and you can see the ramifications still.
We've watched it all change drastically, and it's continuing to change, seemingly on a weekly basis. Let me be somewhat self-deprecating toward our operation for a moment. 2016, we were on all of the networks constantly. But in this first year, as we look back on the first year of the Trump presidency, some of the networks don't seem too eager to have you on anymore.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm not seeing you too much on TV. Since I don't see you at home. I don't see you at TV. I mean, what's going on here? I sometimes see you at my office. That you do show up.
Guys,
I'm running carpool, sweetheart.
What's behind that? They seemed really game in 2016 when the world didn't think that the guy had a shot. Yeah. And now that he's won, and we're living in this reality.
You know what I would love? I would love the media, to focus on policy. Like, focus on the issues. I think that would be so refreshing. I think that they miss so much of, when you are being able to interact with President Trump and with his cabinet and with his team. I mean, we're spending 99.9% of our time working on policy, literally. Like, we are working on what we can do to improve the lives of Americans. It is what we focus in all the time, and it is for the media. It's a lot of it is just the palace intrigue, who's fighting with who, what's happening. It was for me when I saw General Kelly, who is my boss, who hired me, have to go out in public to the press briefing to talk about his son who died, who was a hero in a war. And we all stood there in the White House, we cried. I mean, we were in tears, because why? He had to go out there and try to defend a story. When you listen to these stories, they call you a racist. It is so painful to watch, and I sit 2 doors away from Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who I just love. And day in and day out, she goes out there, and the insults and the accusations never end. They would never treat another press secretary like that. And the fact is that what's so hard for us is the fact that what we want to talk about is what we think matters in the lives of our families and our communities, and instead of all the personality fighting and palace intrigue that many in the press are just completely obsessed with.
I would say that the main reason, I think, look, each one of these media outlets that you guys, that we all try to figure out, the great thing about what's going on in media, and it's not the media, it really isn't, it's so diverse, is you have so many places to get your news. Online, Raheem's here with Breitbart, Town Hall, Washington Times. There's so many places to go. I didn't say the Wichita Eagle. As Judge Eric Yost said when he ran for Congress, which I thought was a great line, he said he was going door to door, and he ran into an older gentleman when he opened the door, and he said to Eric Yost, as a young candidate, he goes, "Son, every morning when I get up, I read the Bible and I read the Wichita Eagle, so I can get both sides of the story." Which I thought was great. I don't read the Eagle that much anymore. Maybe it's gotten better. I don't know. But the point is, there's a lot of places to go to get your information. And I do think that what some of these major television networks have decided to do is it is their job to prosecute the case that Donald Trump is not a legitimately elected president. And if you think about that in terms of their programming, moment by moment, hour by hour, it all becomes much clearer. So, going on some of these shows, they're going to go right to it. You are a racist if you support Donald Trump. You are a hater. They make these charges immediately and frequently. And for me, I have changed my approach to try to shrug it off, laugh it up. Those of you who know me, you shrug it off, you try to smile, you try to turn the other cheek, and I do believe that that's the right theology, but I think there is something important. When someone says something so horrible to you, I can't imagine a worse thing to be called than a racist or a bigot or a homophobe or a Islamophobe or all these things these words they come up with. The idea that we don't look at people and treat them fairly is the worst charge that can be made. And quite frankly, I'm just not going to take it anymore. And I don't think any of us should. That's not who we are.
Mercy, what is President Trump like in person?
And this is on Facebook Live.
He's wonderful. He's so charming. He's incredibly funny. He is incredibly smart. I said this earlier, his instinct is right. He has this incredible amount of energy. I've seen him, especially in the cabinet meetings and his interaction with the cabinet members. He wants results, and he wants results now. This is where, Washington clashes with Trumpism, right? Because Washington, everything is slow moving. It's just the Senate's slow moving. They have so many personality issues. President Trump is like, get me a bill, get it now, and I will sign it if it's the right bill. This is pretty basic, people. And so the way he thinks, I think, is such a clash with Washington, and it is incredibly refreshing. The other thing is he's incredibly transparent, and he's incredibly direct. And you know exactly what he thinks and tweets. And it's very clear. Everyone's always like, so are you going to go in there and stop him from tweeting? And then they go and they ask the next person who comes up. And it's like, no, he is who he is. This is how he communicates. This is how he feels he connects with the American people. He wants people to know who he is. He doesn't feel he has anything to hide in that sense. And then, of course, you meet Melania, and you are just frozen because she's just absolutely gorgeous in person and really just a warm and just loving individual. And she cares greatly, greatly. I mean, she loves being around children, and she's just so, there's something very regal and very special about her. So I feel that being able to even be around the family has been just a wonderful, wonderful part of it as well.
Let me ask you a tough follow-up, since you're used to that type of thing. One of the qualities about candidate Trump that I think made him so attractive to so many people and so different is that he was so clearly enjoying himself on the campaign trail. It was an injection of fun, and that's what the system needed at that moment. Now that he's President Trump, do you think he's still having fun?
Oh, absolutely. I think he loves.
I read all these articles about how you all hate each other, and there's malaise, and the president literally goes running down the hallway screaming at people. And that's what I read about in the Washington Post all the time.
Well, you know, he's going to be frustrated. There's going to be moments where, you know, the demands of a presidency. I mean, we've lived this through President Bush and now going through with President Trump. You know, it's the toughest job in the world, quite frankly, being the leader of this country. But you know, I think I'm going to say this again, he wants results. It's about making sure that looking at his agenda, that we're able to produce and have real results. I think one of the things that with General Kelly being chief of staff, he's brought such grace and dignity to the White House and such respect. We're we all are in awe of working with the general as well, because he understands the importance of order and bringing in different opinions, and then finding where we need to be, and then talking to the president about it. But the president, be ready. He will ask you 100 questions, and it's very unexpected. He'll just turn to you and go, "So, what do you think about XYZ?" And then you're like, "Oh my gosh, did I even study that?" And you know, he really expects a lot from his team, and he wants to ensure that we're doing the right thing. So I think to that case, he's been. Where I love to see him is when he's with the people. It's where I think he gets so much energy, and he doesn't forget where he comes. He doesn't forget that he's there to serve, and he doesn't forget that he knows that things have to get done in Washington.
This is not your first stint in the White House for either of you. Do the folks here in Wichita know how you guys met?
I don't know.
Grandma Sue does, obviously, and
she's left the building. Oh no, she's right there.
I'll set it up as.
Where exactly are you going with this, Ian? I'm getting nervous.
As best as I know this story. Well, it's an intimate moment of a couple in love, but it was under stress and duress, and it was part of the history that we all shared in it as Americans. It was a tough moment for America, and you guys managed to find love in it.
We met in Richard Nixon's old office. Now that's romantic, isn't it, Richard Nixon?
Are there tapes?
And 18 minutes.
It was a meeting.
We met in Richard Nixon's old office, room 180 of the now called Eisenhower office building, and she was on the communications team as she is now, and I was on the political team. And just so you know, I guess probably the accountants don't like the marketing team in companies, or you know, the oil and water. In politics, the comms people hate the political people. The political people come up with sneaky ideas to try to push things, and the comms people see us all as just generating tons of bad press.
For the record, this political team in Trump, they're much easier to deal with than you people are.
I bet so. So anyway, we met at one of these staff meetings, and we kind of took a liking to each other immediately.
So wait, my boss was Nicole Wallace, who's on MSNBC, has her own show right now. Just let's put that in perspective. which,
Yes, you guys
which now
know.
we're in a
You guys
very
watch that
different-
show.
Be a Republican,
But this
Nicole
crowd
Wallace.
apparently does not watch the show.
Okay.
And my boss was Karl Rove. You know him. So anyway, it was interesting.
So we met. Long story short, we start dating, just, a month into the relationship, and then 9/11 happened. So we're both in the White House. They didn't have like a good emergency system in the building, so you would hear the Secret Service running down the hallway and screaming, "Get out! You've got to get out!" This was after, so the towers, the Twin Towers were hit. The Pentagon was hit, and then we were sitting around in a meeting. I was not with Matt. Matt was in another location. Was in the White House, but in a different location. So I leave the building, go in one place. He goes to the next other place, and he went to the right place, which was where you were supposed to go as a White House employee. Obviously, I didn't get the message until much later.
Comms people get confused. I just want you to know from time to time.
Come on.
We had beepers back then. The young people don't even know what beepers are anymore. So what happens? We don't know where everyone's separated.
And
it's
the
chaotic.
phone system stopped working.
To tell you how interesting it was, I ended up in Ed Gillespie, who lost. When was the election? 2 days ago. Went straight to his office, so we were there for a while. And so eventually, I think it was Chrissy, your sister, called. And so, what did she tell you? She said,
So I was in my office, and my mom is a New Yorker. And I saw the one tower had been hit, and then I saw the other tower was hit. And I went back to my office in political affairs, turned on the TV, and saw that the Pentagon was on flames. Now, I'm no brilliant guy, but I thought, wow, if the two towers have been hit and the Pentagon has been hit, we're next. And just as I got up to leave, Ken Melman, my boss, came in, and he said, he always called me Schlapp. He was like, Schlapp, don't you think we're next? I was like, we're definitely next. Let's get everyone. So we literally ran through our suite and got everybody out. But like Mercy said, it wasn't a very good system, and we had two guys who were orphaned on the 4th floor in their own office, and we forgot all about them because you're in a panic. So everyone was kind of, despite what you read, everybody was really just kind of making up what the right protocol was at the moment with watching the television set. So we went running out, and I went out, interestingly enough, with the White House chefs and a lot of the White House personnel, and a lot of people who had White House on their shirts and stuff. And I said, look, why don't we take all of our White House stuff off and hide our IDs and all that stuff? Because we were scared. We didn't know what was going on. And eventually, somebody in our group got, it was about 20 of us, got a page. Because as Mercy was saying, we had beepers and pagers. And we didn't have all the technology we have today. And the page simply said, White House staff, go to this address. Now, the terrorists have just hit us. We realize it's the terrorists. We're on our own on the street. We can't talk to anyone. And now someone is saying, go to this address. We then had the most unbelievable conversation, like you would have in a movie. Is this real, or is it a trap? And we're having this conversation. And 50% of them said, I'm not going. And then 50% of the rest of us said, we're going.
and the 1% obviously didn't get the message. That would have been me.
Yes, that's right. So I went on the way to this location, and on the way, I know Tommy's here and Gabby and Brina. I did get through to my sister Chrissy, and I was in this very long line for a payphone. Imagine that, a payphone. We don't even think about that anymore.
We're
Long
so
line to a
old now.
payphone. The guy in front of me is in tears. One of the towers has fallen by this point. And I say, what's wrong? And he said, my brother's in one of the towers, and I can't figure out which tower fell, and I'm trying to figure it out. And I said, I have this feeling that everything's fine. I just have this feeling. I was lying. I didn't know. I just was trying to make him feel better. And then as we were waiting in line, that other tower fell. And he put it all together like his brother, unless he had been sick that day or whatever, was dead. And then when I got to the phone, there was a lot of that type of thing in the line. The only person I could get was my sister Chrissy. And she said to me, have you found Mercy? And I said, I can't find her. She said, you find her and you tell her you love her. And basically it was my younger sister telling me to grow up and get with it. It was really good advice, by the way. Fabulous advice.
You guys have lived through and loved through moments in history together. One of my favorite memories of you two is talking to each other on the phone on election night 2016. You guys were in New York City.
Is this why I was still sober?
You were in the room. It was 3 or 4.
I don't think
in the
anybody
morning.
in America was sober this last election
And we
night.
handed the phone off to
Rachel
you guys
Maddow
hand-
definitely wasn't it.
So tell the story. What happened?
What was it like being in that room?
Oh,
you
and
know?
we went to Steve Bannon allowed us to go to Trump Tower, which was very nice of him. So we spent the day doing interviews and going to the tower, and it was great because the whole thing was there. Donald Trump was there, his whole family, his kids. The whole RNC operation had been moved there. There was a room dedicated to tracking all the key states. There was a rapid response room. They just had everything right there. And by the way, the president, soon-to-be president-elect, soon-to-be vice president-elect, their wives, everyone's just milling around together. Jeff Sessions was there. It was the strangest thing. And as I woke up that day with a sense of dread. I just thought, I've been feeling so optimistic that we were going to win, and that morning I just had a sense of dread that we were going to get 4 more years of those Clintons. And I just was so depressed about it. And we went over to Fox, and the returns were starting to come in, and we ran into Laura Ingraham and Monica Crowley, Lou Dobbs. I was about ready to go on Lou Dobbs' show. And so at Fox, it was interesting because you had your people that hated Trump and you had your people that loved Trump. And we were in a little bevy of people that all supported Trump. It was the 4 of us, and we were all basically having an emotional meltdown. I was the only dude, but emotional meltdown about was it going to happen, was it not going to happen? And I then did this hit with Lou Dobbs, and the returns were coming in, but I have to tell you, I don't think the news media, probably even a bit at Fox too, nobody was seeing what was happening. Yeah. And they couldn't believe that the polls could have been that wrong. And so during a break, I was explaining to Lou how I saw it and how much more optimistic I saw things, both in Florida and North Carolina. Then at the break, I was excused. Mercy's there. There's some other people in the green room. We get on the Fox computers. We start giving them our version of events, which is much more optimistic. So it was fascinating. It was a really interesting day. And then we went over to we're at Trump Tower. They say, hey, go to the party at the Hilton. So we leave to go to the party. And as we're walking out of Trump Tower, all these, friends of the campaign are streaming out of the building. There's a guy in a hard hat, you just can't make it up, a hard hat and an orange vest, and they're doing, like they do in New York, they're doing the construction at night because you couldn't possibly do it. It's too busy during the day. And this guy, Mom, you could do the accent better, in his best New York accent, he was like, God bless Donald Trump. He did it without the party. He did it himself. And then all these other construction guys started chiming in the same thing. And then we passed all these cops. And people were saying, God bless you, thank you to the cops. Because that was a big issue in the campaign, as you all remember, was, the blue lives matter as well as black lives. And the cops, one guy was crying. It was such an amazing moment in the middle of New York City. Couldn't believe it.
You don't have to respond to this, but thank you, Donna Brazil, for proving everything that you said in 2016 ever being right and accurate and fair. It's taken a year, but it's all coming out now, isn't it? I'm willing to open it up to the floor if anybody has any questions for Matt and Mercy. I see a gentleman over there. Is Sebastian around? Karin?
Adam, right here. And Adam, just so you know, on your tax question, we share a lot of your concerns. We're encouraged that they've started the process because if Republicans don't repeal Obamacare and pass a major tax cut bill, or as the president likes to say, a cut bill, I think there's going to be hell to pay with the voters. So we got to get the bill done, but they got to make it better.
Got to be a good bill.
Can you help us work through, in the Republican Party, everybody seems to be on different sides, and we're all supposed to be on the same team, but who are we, and what are we supporting?
It's a great question. I'll jump at it first, Mercy, and then you can go. But what I would tell you is that there's no such thing as a Democratic Party and a Republican Party, and one wins and the other wins. It's much more coalitional, even though this is America and we're not Europe. It's much more coalitional than we oftentimes remember. And there are a lot of people that vote for Republican candidates who aren't Republicans. Sometimes they call themselves conservatives. Sometimes they call themselves independents. Same thing is true for Democrats. So roughly, I think most conservatives and Republicans kind of come together, and most liberals and Democrats come together. The problem with that is this. So much of what the Republican Party has bought into over the decades, some wonderful things that we talked about here today with the Reagan legacy. So many of the things the Republican Party talked about in the last couple of decades didn't turn out to be quite so to a lot of voters. And I think that's definitely true for the left and their increased radicalism and progressivism. And so I just would say to you, Adam, I think it's changing. People are shedding titles and picking up new titles, or maybe don't want any title at all. I think Americans don't want to join things like they wanted to, like, all these community groups we used to join. I think people don't join that as much. I think people want to be independent, and they want to be of their own mind. And for a lot of Republicans who are traditionalists by and large, it scares the hell out of them, all this change. And once again, going back to the strategy we pulled together at ACU was to embrace the change, to listen to people, to listen to what they are saying, and then to try to take what's not so good about it and get it on a better path, and really embrace what's good about it, and just understand that the Republican Party is going to change going forward, and the conservative movement is changing going forward, and that the American people are in charge. And the only part of that that would scare me is if we start to shed these conservative values and beliefs. But I don't believe that's what's happening. I think people are very open to hearing this message.
And I do just want to say, I want to say one quick thing is, it's critical that we keep the House. It's critical that we keep the Senate. If the Democrats win control of the House, there will be no movement, it will be very little to no movement in the president's legislative agenda. So it is critical with these midterm elections coming up that these seats are going to be very, very competitive. And I know, and there is this sense within the Republican Party of where it is. And I think being divided is complicated, and it's important to find that united voice and to understand that President Trump is the leader of the party. And one of the things he's done so effectively is connect with the American worker. That's something that the Democrats have always laid claim to, and it's really President Trump who's focused on helping the American worker.
Yeah, I think that's right. And let me just mention one thing else. Let's just put it out there on the table. One of the things we do, all of you in this room, maybe most of you are conservatives, maybe most of you are Republicans, maybe most of you are both. You don't agree on everything. There's disagreement in this room. Guess what? That's what makes the world go round. That's what makes us Americans. We're fiercely independent. We don't want to be homogeneic in all of our views. And so guess what? We're going to have primaries. And that's okay. We should be able to disagree with each other as Republicans and as center-right people. It's okay to disagree. And I think there are just some people who believe that all of that division results in negative things for our movement. And I would say hiding it, pushing it under the rug, not discussing it is actually, I think, more dangerous. So I'm not advocating for primaries in every case, as some do, but I'm also saying it's okay. It's part of this process. I think it'll make our party better, and I think we ought to expand our coalition. And as Mercy says, we ought to be a majority party. We ought to be able to win everywhere, because if we can win everywhere, we can get these things implemented that we talked about today.
The liberal media's narrative is that the Republican Party is in terrible shape. But I believe that the Democrat Party is actually in worse shape than the Republicans at this point. I cite Donna Brazil's book as Exhibit A. Do you agree or disagree with me?
You're brilliant. I agree with you completely. The Donna Brazil, first of all, I think she deserves a little bit of criticism for the fact that she herself leaked those questions to John Podesta and to Hillary Clinton during the primary process with Bernie Sanders. So she's a little bit trying to have her cake and eat it too. But I also think she's very brave to actually say what the truth is, which is she found the written documentation that, guess what, it was rigged.
Let me push back a little bit on what you're saying. I just saw Tom Perez doing the full Ginsburg on television saying that these recent elections, Gillespie and Northam and the governorship of New Jersey, that this is a big shot in the arm for the Democrat Party, that this foretells the big victories that they're going to get in 2018. What do you say to that?
So I don't know if you've heard this term, the swamp. I don't know where the swamp lives. Northern Virginia. If there was any state in the Union that, even though it is in some ways evenly divided, but it's more of a blue state, where the Trump message was going to encounter turbulence, it was at the state where the swamp lives. Now, the swamp also lives in Maryland and D.C., I get that. But when you're taking on what he likes to call fake news, and they all live in that state, and when you're taking on the bureaucrats, which I view the swamp is this left-leaning bureaucracy in the federal government that thinks it's in charge even when someone like Donald Trump is elected. Most of them are our neighbors, and they live in Virginia. By the way, sometimes they're wonderful, nice people, but their politics we don't share. And so I think that was going to be an awful tough state to try out this new Trump agenda. And I think I used to live in New Jersey. I don't know what we want to say about New Jersey, Mom. The idea that it should be a shock that the Democrats won in New Jersey, I don't think it's very shocking to any of us. Look, I say this. The Democrats had a good day. Congratulations. I think they had the better day. We didn't have the better day. I hope they get cocky about it. I hope Mr. Perez and the rest of them think that this is a harbinger and that this means that people have rejected Trump, because this is the line that's on television, is that the Trump agenda is unpopular and he's illegitimate, and you can see the results in Virginia and New Jersey. I hope they keep doing that. That overconfidence is going to give us a great opportunity to keep the majorities.
Mike, last question.
In Washington, when a guy has a pink shirt on like that, we worry that he's going to be a protester, but you're clearly the opposite.
No,
You're the opposite. This is this is a good shirt. It's a breast cancer shirt.
That's
it's all
right.
good.
It's
Okay,
left
that's
over
right.
from last month. I think you pretty much answered my question there. I just wanted to see, are we going to see more of this Virginia thing? How much do we need to look into the results of that election 2 days ago? Is this something we're going to have to be worried about in 18?
Well, yeah, you're going to have to be worried about it, because the Washington Post and the New York Times are going to make sure that this is front page news for the next year.
But you're talking, there's about 24 swing districts. So to take control of the House, it's 24 seats. And so many of these swing districts are where Hillary Clinton won. So these seats are going to be incredibly competitive. And and the thing with the Democrats and Republicans are both focused on recruitment. So it's who they're going to put in there. Are they going to put the Bernie Sanders candidate, or are they going to put a more moderate candidate? So that's all going to play in. The competitive. They're going to be competitive seats. I think what we're going to see is when you start seeing an economic growth at over 3% consecutively, when you start people feeling, you know what, America's back again, and it needs to be where we need to be, and the issue of national security is a critical issue, and President Trump is leading on all these fronts. I think it will be competitive, but I think the Republicans are going to could be strong and stay competitive too.
I think that the key element of our politics today is we have to just talk clearly and honestly and call it for what it is. That's what really you want. That's what the voters really ask for. They don't really need all of the ridiculous, I can think of a lot of terms I could use right now, subterfuge for describing the way things are. And I know we need to close out, but I would say what we do at the American Conservative Union is we're going to try to interpret what's happening in the swamp in Washington in a way where it seems clearer to you. And what we want to do is take what's happening and tie it to a value that we share as Americans. And it's important for us to do that. And this is where Republicans sometimes get screwed up. I'll give you an example. There's an issue brewing in Congress where they want to privatize the air traffic controller system. And there's folks that think that's good because they say government's too big and we ought to privatize things and we ought to reduce government spending on them. And so they use a wonderful word like privatization. And Dan Schneider and Michi and Jackie and the rest of our policy team got together and they said, well, wait a minute. if it's privatization, shouldn't privatization mean something? And we came up with a 5 or 6 point test. Dan's giving 7-point test to determine whether something's privatization. On this topic, just so you know, privatization is described, and in this case it's by Republicans who are not being accurate. It's described as creating a pseudo-government entity like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac that has a board that is determined by the Secretary of Transportation, which is not a private sector person, by the way, that locks in union contracts over decades that will actually mean that the labor spending will be higher instead of lower, with no ability to hire and fire and change things. You all know, who raised your hands earlier, those of you who run businesses or have businesses, what's your number one cost? It's usually your labor. Sometimes it's energy, sometimes it's other things, but it's usually labor. And if at the federal government level, if it's always going to be federal union contracts locked in that we can't have any impact on, there's no privatization to that. And of course, the other thing is, even as conservatives, there are certain things the government should do really, really well. The military should be well funded. It should know how to kill people, break things, and keep us safe. And I, for one, am okay with an air traffic control system and only having one. And those of you who are pilots in the room, I know there are a lot, probably feel the same way. And it's also about big versus little. So on all these issues, and that's just one that I choose that we haven't talked about today, what we're going to do as an organization is we're going to try to break through this verbiage that people use and explain it to you in very clear terms. And then you get to make up your mind. You get to make up your mind whether or not you think the latest healthcare version makes sense. You get to make up your mind as to whether the latest version on this tax bill makes sense. And that's what's going to make the country better.
Folks, that's the last word.
Can I say one quick thing?
One more for Mercy.
I always have the last
Mercy
word.
works at the White House, so we defer.
No, but I want to say a real cute story. So our oldest, who's 14, and she started 9th grade, and so she was telling me, she's like, Mom, I'll probably live in a big city at some point. She goes, but I really want to see if I would like to find my husband somewhere in the Midwest, the same way you did with Dad.
Oh, I love that.
And so, I'm born and raised in Miami, very traditional Cuban family. I came here to Kansas 16 years ago, and I was welcomed with open arms by the Schlapp family and by this community. And so it is my home as well. And so I do, seriously, so many blessings, because the Kansan values are American values. And those are the values that we have to enshrine and ensure that it's passed on from generation to generation. And if there's someone that understands that, that's President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence.
And you guys are doing a great job of doing that with your family.
Mercy's crying.
Folks, that's Matt Schlapp and Mercedes Schlapp.
Thank you all for being here. This is
Aspera.
wonderful. We appreciate it. We're going to hang out, and let's make sure we get to say hi.
Darling, I hope that you'll be here when I need you the most. So